Steven Spielberg has made some of the most iconic movies in history. Why does Spielberg rewatch The Searchers before starting a new project? Which recent blockbuster did he compare to Star Wars and Lawrence of Arabia? From a samurai epic that nearly ruined its director to the superhero movie that forced the Oscars to change their rules, these are the movies Spielberg calls essential viewing. John Ford's The Searchers is one of the most influential westerns ever made, but for Spielberg, it's personal. The story follows Ethan Edwards, a Civil War veteran, on a long and bitter search for his kidnapped niece. The film's landscapes and mood are unforgettable, but the real reason it matters is how Ford framed his shots. Spielberg once said Ford celebrates the frame, not just what's inside it. He's like a classic painter. Spielberg has admitted that before starting a new project, he tries to watch a John Ford film, just to remind himself what cinema can look like when every frame feels deliberate. He even compared it to recharging his batteries. And he's not alone. Scorsese puts The Searchers on his own essential list too. That's the level of influence we're talking about. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight pushed superhero movies to a new level, and Spielberg has never been shy about calling it one of the greats. He pointed out that it was one of the rare sequels that didn't just match the original, it surpassed it. What frustrated him was the way the Academy ignored it. In 2008, no Best Picture nomination, no Best Director nomination, even though the film completely reshaped how people thought about blockbusters. Years later, Spielberg admitted the Academy's expansion of the Best Picture category from 5 nominees to 10 was basically a reaction to The Dark Knight being snubbed. In his own words, it came late for the film that should have been nominated a number of years ago, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. That movie would have definitely garnered a Best Picture nomination today. Spielberg praising Guardians of the Galaxy was a big deal because it showed he wasn't just locked into nostalgia or serious cinema, he recognized something genuinely fresh. James Gunn's movie about a space outlaw and his band of misfits shouldn't have worked. Nobody knew these characters. They weren't Spider-Man, they weren't Iron Man, but the film's mix of humor, heart, and weirdness won everybody over, including Spielberg. As he put it, when it ended, I left the cinema with the feeling that I had just experienced something new, free of cynicism and without concern for being gritty when necessary. Coming from the man who basically invented the modern blockbuster, that's huge. Guardians took a risk, and Spielberg saw that risk pay off. And he wasn't the only one. Al Pacino said he liked it too, though he called it the galaxy thing. Even that tells you how much it broke through, reaching people who normally wouldn't bother with superheroes. If there's one film Spielberg always goes back to, it's Lawrence of Arabia. He calls it his favorite movie of all time, the one that made him want to be a filmmaker, and briefly the one that made him think he could never measure up. He was about 16 when he first saw it on 70mm with stereophonic sound. He said, "When the film was over, I wanted to not be a director anymore, because the bar was too high." But that feeling of being overwhelmed turned into inspiration. Spielberg studied how David Lean balanced huge desert landscapes with intimate character themes. He later explained, "What makes that film unlike anything that can be made again is that it was done naturally, with the elements of light, sound, and maybe the greatest screenplay ever written." It's the movie that taught him cinema could be both epic and deeply personal. And it's telling that even decades later, he still calls Lean his hero. Spielberg calls Kurosawa the pictorial Shakespeare of our time, and you can see why. The story of 7 warriors protecting a village from bandits is simple, but the way Kurosawa told it changed everything. The pacing, the way tension builds, the sense of teamwork. You can see it echoed in Saving Private Ryan and even in Minority Report. Making 7 Samurai nearly destroyed Kurosawa. The shoot stretched from 3 months to almost a year. The budget doubled. The weather ruined sets. He shot over 340,000 feet of film, unheard of back then. The studio panicked. They thought he was out of control. He fought with executives constantly, demanding real mud, real exhaustion, real intensity. At the time, Toho thought they'd backed a disaster. It didn't bomb, but it didn't make a fortune either, just enough to survive. Kurosawa himself said if it had failed, he would have vanished. Instead, it became one of the most influential films ever made. Everything from The Magnificent Seven to Star Wars to Mad Max Fury Road owes something to it. Spielberg recognized that power and he carried it into his own work. Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey is more than just a film for Spielberg, it's an event. The first time Spielberg saw it, he said it felt like a religious experience. That's how much this movie affected him. Everything about it, from that legendary opening all the way to the Stargate finale, throws you into the unknown and just leaves you there, wrestling with ideas about humanity, evolution, and artificial intelligence. Spielberg talked about being in the theater and actually seeing a guy get up out of his seat and walk toward the screen during the Stargate sequence, completely hypnotized by what Kubrick put up there. That's the kind of impact we're talking about. For Spielberg, Space Odyssey sits at the top of the sci-fi mountain. He's not alone. James Cameron once said the film shook him to his core. Even Tom Hanks admits he watched it so many times he can quote every single line. Kubrick won the Oscar for visual effects, but the movie did a lot more. It set a standard for artistry, for ambition, for just going further than anyone thought possible. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho changed the way Spielberg saw horror. He calls it his favorite horror movie of all time. Hitchcock shot it fast, cheap, and in black and white with his TV crew instead of the usual movie team. There was almost no dialogue in some scenes. The sets, Bates Motel and the mansion, went up right on the Universal back lot. Hitchcock wanted it to look rough, even a little trashy, and it worked. The result felt more like film noir than Hitchcock's polished thrillers. Even the way Hitchcock made it was sneaky. He bought up as many copies of the novel as possible to keep the ending secret and bought the rights anonymously for only $9,000. The idea was to keep audiences guessing until the last second. Hitchcock himself once said, "I was directing the viewers, playing them like an organ." That's exactly what Spielberg admired, the way Hitchcock could manipulate people, create pure movie suspense. Even the relationship between the two men is a story in itself. Despite Spielberg's admiration, Hitchcock never wanted to meet him. According to Bruce Dern, Hitchcock called Spielberg the boy who made the Fish movie and felt embarrassed after lending his voice to the Jaws ride at Universal. Spielberg holds Orson Welles' Citizen Kane as a true icon, not just a classic, but a symbol of filmmaking courage. He's talked about the audacity it took to make Kane, breaking rules, inventing new techniques, using deep focus, and building a movie around a mystery that stretches across an entire life. Welles was barely 26 when Citizen Kane came out. He wrote, produced, directed, and starred in it, riding a wave of confidence that only comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. But Citizen Kane didn't have an easy run. Welles had to keep the William Randolph Hearst connection under wraps, knowing that Hearst's newspapers could destroy the film. Hearst responded by banning any mention or advertising of Kane in his papers, then launched a smear campaign against Welles and even considered suing him. Despite all of this, Citizen Kane picked up 9 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, though it won only for Best Screenplay. Reportedly, the film was even booed at the Oscars every time its name was announced. For Spielberg, The Godfather wasn't just a great movie, it was almost too good. When he saw what Coppola did with Mario Puzo's story, he actually thought about quitting directing altogether because he doubted he could ever reach that level. That's how powerful The Godfather felt to the filmmakers of that era. Spielberg and Coppola belonged to the new Hollywood generation, along with Scorsese and Lucas. They all pushed boundaries and changed the industry. But The Godfather set a bar that almost felt out of reach. Everything about its production was legendary, from the fights over casting Marlon Brando and Al Pacino to the real-life mob threatening the production. The Godfather saved Paramount Pictures, dominated the box office in 1972, and won multiple Oscars. Spielberg never forgot the feeling he had after seeing it for the first time. "I felt that I should quit, that there was no reason I should continue directing because I would never achieve that level of confidence and ability to tell a story."